already given up on your New Year's resolution to make this the year you finally take your guitar progress seriously, then I'm guessing that your practice plan has gone out the window and you've reverted back to repeating the #1 bad habit that keeps guitarists trapped in a rut. And in this video, I'm going to explain why eliminating this bad habit could be the most important thing for your guitar practice in 2025. And I'll offer some suggestions for better practice habits to replace it with. So what is this bad habit? It's too much noodling, not enough intentional playing. What's the difference? Well, noodling is what I do when I pick up the guitar, plug in, and just start shredding my favorite licks, like this. What I just played there was a prime example of the worst type of noodling you can do, and that's because I neglected to do two things when playing. The first was to keep time. I wasn't playing to a backing track, drum loop, or metronome, but not only that, I wasn't even imagining some sort of rhythm section in my mind to keep time with so that I could play a solo that was in time and followed some sort of chord progression. Which leads me to the other thing I neglected to do, which was play with harmonic intent. I wasn't imagining a chord progression in my head and following it by playing lines that showed an awareness of the underlying harmony. It was all just A minor pentatonic nonsense. So I wasn't trying to keep time and I wasn't playing with any harmonic intent. To do both of those things requires concentration and focused efforts, which means they are challenging. Aimless noodling is not challenging, it's comfortable, which is why so many of us, myself included, do it far more often than we should. And if you're constantly choosing comfort over challenge when you pick up the guitar each day, then that is why you haven't been making progress. So with that in mind, let's look at some better practice habits that you can adopt so that you can get yourself unstuck and back on the path of progress. It should come as no surprise to you that I'm going to advise you to do the opposite of what I demonstrated with that noodling example. Play with both harmonic and rhythmic intent. Now there's 3 levels to practicing this and I'll demonstrate the easiest one for you now. I'm going to play over a backing track that has a rhythm section and a simple chord progression to follow. Alright, so that track has drums playing a steady groove and a bass line that's following a chord progression, and when I played over it, I was conscious of both and doing my best to keep time with the drums and also highlight the chord changes with my note choices. Now, a common mistake that guitarists make when practicing improvisation over a backing track is they'll go and find one on YouTube, they'll hit play, and instantly start trying to improvise without first taking the time to memorize the chord progressions. And what that often turns into is mindless noodling just over a backing track. But remember, we want to avoid noodling and play with some intention. So before you start shredding over that backing track, listen to it first. Take note of the chord progression and the key, and when you're practicing, challenge yourself to play lines that follow that chord progression. For example, the first line I played over that track moved through all 4 chords in the progression: D major, A major, B minor, and G major. To highlight those chords in my solo, I played something that flowed through triad shapes for each chord within the D major scale, since that's the key that the track is in. If you'd like to learn how to use triads to craft melodic solos that highlight the chord changes, that's something you can begin learning today with my Melodic Soloing Masterclass. This is a free 45-minute video masterclass complete with tab files and a backing track that shows you how to break free from the limitations of pattern-based soloing, which often just sounds like aimless noodling, and it shows you how to start crafting melodic solos that always land on the right notes at the right time. If you're interested in signing up, just click the link in the description box and pinned comment beneath the video to get instant access for free. In addition to making efforts to highlight the chord changes, I was being mindful of the tempo and doing my best to keep time with the drums. Here's an example of not paying any attention to the tempo and groove. Versus listening to the drum groove and playing in a way that supports it. Ignoring the tempo and groove of the song when soloing is a very amateur thing to do. Rhythm isn't just for rhythm guitar, it is equally important to be in the pocket when you're playing solos. The next level of this exercise is more challenging, and that's because we're going to remove the harmonic content from the backing track, which in this case is just a bass line outlining the chords, and we're just going to play to the isolated drum track on its own. This means that I'm no longer going to be informed of the chord changes by the bass player. I'm going to have to keep track of them in my head as I improvise. Hopefully you can still hear the chord changes in my solo. That's a skill you won't develop from noodling mindlessly on your own each time you pick up your guitar to practice. It is a skill that you can acquire through repeatedly practicing what I've been telling you to do in this video. Picking a backing track, listening to the chord changes, memorizing them, and improvising lines that highlight the changes, i.e. playing with harmonic intent. Now, when you're first getting started with this, it's going to be challenging. You are going to fail countless times before it starts to click. But there's nothing wrong with failure so long as you don't give into it and ultimately give up. In fact, it's something that you should embrace and reframe in your mind as a positive. So if you try this exercise today and your first attempt sounds like this, that is okay. Don't let it get to you when you make those mistakes. If your thought process when practicing this is, oh, I just made another mistake, this is hard, I can't do it, I will never be able to do it, let me just go back to noodling. If that's your attitude, then you will never be able to do it. But if you simply reframe your mistakes as an essential part of the journey and think to yourself, made another mistake, but that's okay, as long as I keep pushing through those mistakes, eventually I'm gonna get better at this. If you can adopt that mindset, then the pieces will fall into place with enough time. Now, the final level of this exercise is, of course, the most challenging of all. In the second exercise, I removed the harmonic content from the backing track. I took out the bass line so that it was just me and the drummer, meaning I had to consciously think of the chord changes when playing my solo because no one was playing them for me. But at least I had the drummer holding down the groove. So now let's ditch the drums as well. I'm going to improvise some lines whilst doing my best to play in time, stick to a constant tempo, not rush or drag, and follow the chord changes in my head. I'll start by simply strumming the chord progression and then I'll begin my improvised solo. Now, I demonstrated the 3 levels of this exercise in a very deliberate order. Starting with level 3 would feel quite demoralizing because having to actively think about staying in time and also following the chord changes completely on your own without any sort of backing is going to feel way too overwhelming, especially if you're new to this. So I would suggest spending the next few weeks with exercise 1 with one backing track, just one. Find something that you think you'll enjoy soloing over, listen to the track a few times first, write out the chord progression and commit it to memory. Then start trying to improvise over it every day when you sit down to practice. Once you've started to feel comfortable with level 1, you can move on to level 2 and remove the harmonic content from the track. There are AI tools out there that can remove bass and guitars from audio, but you could also just search for a drum loop on YouTube that sounds close to the original track and practice along to that whilst thinking of the chord changes in your head. After a few weeks of practicing level 2, you can move on to the final boss level and practice improvising whilst keeping time with yourself and making efforts to follow the chord progression in your head. Why do I think you should work towards being able to improvise a solo unaccompanied? Well, just think about it. If you can sound great playing a solo on your own by staying in time and following the chord changes without tripping up, if you can do that, just think how good you would sound playing with a band behind you. So that is what I'd recommend you start practicing for the next few months, instead of only noodling when you pick up your guitar each day. If playing over chord changes is something that you're struggling with right now, as I mentioned earlier, I have a free resource that will help you to stop noodling and start crafting melodic solos that always land on the right notes at the right time. Just click the link in the description box and pinned comment beneath the video to get instant access to my 45-minute melodic soloing video masterclass and begin to break out of your lead guitar rut today.